Hey everyone, welcome to Today in My Sewing Room. Today I want to talk to you about hand sewing. I hate hand sewing. I really hate hand sewing. It is the bane of my sewing existence, and if I can avoid it, I will. But sometimes you can't avoid it. So I want to talk to you about some ways that through trial and error I found make my life a whole lot easier and make hand sewing, the thing I hate, a whole lot less hassle. To begin with, you need hand sewing needles. Now, I picked these up at the dollar store the other day just because I couldn't find my hand sewing needles. They come in a big pack. There are probably a bazillion in here. And here's what's important to me about these hand sewing needles. 3 things. First of all, they're all long enough for me to be able to get a hold of. Secondly, they all have big eyes. I can thread them. And that's important to me because my eyes are not what they used to be. I just want to be able to get the thread through them because I'm very impatient in my sewing, which is another reason why I hate to hand sew. And the other thing was they're $1. For that many, for a bazillion, that's a pretty good deal. Now, there are all kinds of handles, and if you really want to know what all kinds there are and what they're for, their purposes and all that sort of thing, then I encourage you to Google that. Today, I'm not going to talk about that. Now, when I learned a long time ago to sew, I learned about hand sewing probably the same way you did. I learned that when you sew a button on, you probably want 2 strands of thread, and when you hem or do straight line stitching, you probably just want 1. So when you want 1, you make 1 thread shorter than the other, like that, and the other one you put a knot in this end. Or if you want it doubled, you bring them down and you make them even and you knot them. Now here's how I learned how to knot them. Wet your finger, wet your thread, take your thread, wrap it a couple of times around your finger like that, and then you see how that end is? You just kind of roll that and then take your fingernail and pull down, and that's supposed to make your knot. Now you can go to a lot of trouble and do this slowly and try and pull the knot in, but what I've found is this: either it pulls right out like that, see I have no knot, let's try it again. Or you end up with, when I roll this just to make it fast, I end up with something that looks like a dead fly at the end of my thread. Now that's pretty gross, honestly. But I have, worked with it, and what I've done when I'm sewing on a button, for example, I'll sew it, and then what I do is once I take a stitch, then I put the button on top, and then I cover up the knot. This isn't my first choice for the way to knot some threads. So what I've done is play with a couple of other methods. Take your threaded needle, take a small stitch at the place where you want to begin hand sewing. Don't pull your thread all the way through. Pull it most of the way through, but not quite all. Now take another stitch right over top of where you stitched before. Now you've got a stitch with the tail. Now one more exact same spot. Go over it one more time, pull it tight, and you can pull it tight from this end too. But what you've got is a tight little spot here. That's not going to come undone, and you can continue on with your sewing as normal. Works in place of a knot. Now the way that I most often do this is like this. I take a stitch like this at the beginning where I want to sew, pull through but not all the way again. Now I take my needle, take the end, kind of loop it around, and then tie it like you're going to tie a shoe. There we go. Just tie it just like this. And now tie it again. Just make a loop, pull your needle through, and now you have a nice knot. And you can trim off that thread and continue on with your sewing. Now let's say you come to the end of your sewing and you want to make a knot and finish it off. Now, we all probably do this the same way, but I'll show you the way I do it too. You take 1 stitch, but you don't pull your needle all the way through. You just kind of leave your needle in about halfway. Now I pull the top of my needle up, and then from the bottom of the needle, or the top, depending on how you're looking at it, where the eye is, this end, I'm going to take the thread from that end, and I'm going to hold my needle up, and I'm going to wrap 1, 2, 3 times around the end of the pointed tip of my needle, but I'm going to go right over top of my thumb here, and I'm going to kind of loop it over and then wrap around, and then I'm going to just pull my thread out like this. Now I'm going to pull my needle through. I'll turn around so you can see this, like this. But see how I'm holding that down with my thumb? Now the reason I do that is because if I don't, unless I go really, really slowly, I'm going to end up with a knot. So it kind of holds some tension on the thread. Then I can slide my thumb out when I get close to the end, and then I can pull that taut like that, and I have a nice finished knot. That's pretty secure, and I'm all done. And that's my quick tip on hand sewing. I hope you do as little of it as possible, but I hope when you do have to do it that this makes it a lot easier. So I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.